I opened the book with two quotes in the epigraph. And one of them is from Sam Altman writing a blog post in 2013. And he quotes someone else that says, successful people build companies, more successful people build countries. The most successful people build.
In a stunningly candid interview, investigative journalist Karen Hayao exposes the imperial ambitions of companies like OpenAI, revealing a truth that is far more unsettling than any science fiction story about rogue AI. Let's start with the single most important frame she provides. She argues that we shouldn't see these companies as tech innovators, but as modern-day versions of the British East India Company.
That is the analogy that I've increasingly started using, especially with the Trump administration in power, because the British East India Company very much was a corporate empire and started off not very imperial. They just started off as a company, very small company based in London. And of course, through economic trade agreements with India, gained significant economic power, political power, and eventually became the apex predator in that ecosystem. And that's when they started being very imperial in nature. And they were the entire time abetted by the British Empire, the nation state empire. So you have a corporate empire, you have a nation state empire. And I literally see that dynamic playing out now, where the US government is also in its empire era.
This is the game changer. For years, we've been talking about AI in terms of products and features. How forces us to see it for what it is, a global conquest for resources, land, water, energy, data, and human labor. She's saying OpenAI and others are not just competing with Google. They are acting as apex predators, using nation-states as assets to achieve their own imperial goals. The alliance between Silicon Valley and Washington isn't a partnership. It's a tense, temporary pact between two competing empires, each trying to use the other to become the dominant global power. But what kind of ideology, what belief system could possibly justify this level of ruthless ambition? It turns out it's not about quarterly earnings. It's about something much more primal.
And I opened the book with two quotes in the epigraph. And one of them is from Sam Altman writing a blog post in 2013. And he quotes someone else that says, successful people build companies, more successful people build countries. The most successful people build religions. And then he reflects on this and says, it seems to me that the most successful founders in the world don't actually set off to build a company. They set off to build a religion. And it turns out building a company is the easiest way to do so. And so, it's not like 2013 and then 2015, he creates OpenAI as a nonprofit.
The multi-trillion-dollar AI race isn't being driven by a sound business case. It's being driven by a quasi-religious fervor. They are not building a product. They are building a religion. This explains the baffling decisions, the burning of billions of dollars without a clear path to profit. They believe they are manifesting a new kind of intelligence, a civilizational transformation. When that is your goal, any cost becomes justifiable. The ends don't just justify the means. The ends are so grand, the means become irrelevant. And the physical cost of this religion is staggering. It's a cost paid not by Silicon Valley, but by communities around the world who are losing the most essential resources for life.
So one of the aspects that's really under-talked about with this kind of AI development, the OpenAI's version of AI development, is that these data centers need fresh water to cool, because if they used any other kind of water, it would corrode the equipment, it would lead to bacterial growth. And so most often these data centers actually use public drinking water, because when they enter into a community, that is the infrastructure that's already laid to deliver the fresh water to companies, to businesses, to residents. And so one of the things that I highlight in my book is there are many, many communities that are already, they do not have sufficient drinking water even for people. And I went to Montevideo, Uruguay, to speak with people about a historic level of drought that they were experiencing, where the Montevideo government literally did not have enough water to put into the public drinking water supply. So they were mixing toxic wastewater in just so people could have something come out of their taps when they opened them. And for people that were too poor to buy bottled water, that is what they were drinking.
This is the brutal reality behind the clean interface of ChatGPT. While a government is forced to mix toxic wastewater into the public drinking supply, a tech giant proposes to build a data center that will consume even more of that precious resource. And as Karen Heo points out later in the video, this isn't just happening in the global south. It's happening in the UK, where data center energy demands have literally led to a ban on building new homes in certain areas. The abstract cloud is creating concrete scarcity. They are terraforming the planet for their machines, and the cost is our water and our homes. But the resources they consume aren't just environmental. This empire is built on a hidden, global supply chain of human trauma.
The workers ended up suffering very many of the same symptoms of content moderators of the social media era. Absolutely traumatized by the work, completely changed their personalities, left them with PTSD. And I highlight the story of this man, Mo Fadokinye, who is one of the workers that I interviewed, who showed to me that it's not just individuals that break down, it's their families and communities, because there are people who rely on these individuals. And so Mofat was on the sexual content team. His personality totally changed as he was reading child sexual abuse every day. And when he came home, he stopped playing with his stepdaughter. He stopped being intimate with his wife, and he also couldn't explain to them why he was changing, because he didn't know how to say to them, I read sex content all day. That doesn't sound like a real job. That sounds like a very shameful job. ChatGPT hadn't come out yet, so there was no conception of what does that even mean. And so one day, his wife asks him for fish for dinner. He goes out, buys 3 fish, one for him, one for her, one for the stepdaughter. And by the time he comes home, all of their bags are packed and they're completely gone.
Listen to that story again. To make ChatGPT safe and palatable for us, workers in Kenya are paid a few dollars an hour to wade through the most toxic content imaginable, content the AI itself is prompted to create. The psychological damage is so profound it destroys not just individuals, but their families. This isn't a bug in the system. This is a core feature of the colonial model. The trauma, like the resource extraction, is outsourced to the global poor. It is the human sacrifice required to maintain the clean, sterile image of the empire's products.
But actually, before OpenAI started building large language models and generative AI systems at these colossal scales, the trend within the AI research community was going the opposite direction towards tiny AI systems. And there was all this really interesting research looking into how small your data sets could be to create powerful AI models and how little computational resources you needed to create powerful AI models. So there were interesting papers that I wrote about where you could have a couple hundred images to create highly performant AI systems, or you could have AI systems trained on your mobile device. That's like not even a one computer chip running on your mobile device. And OpenAI took an approach that is now using hundreds of thousands of computer chips to train a single system. And those hundreds of thousands of computer chips now are consuming, city loads of energy.
The scaling is the only way mantra is not a scientific truth. It is a monopolistic strategy. By convincing the world that true AI requires city-sized data centers, they create a barrier to entry that no one else can cross. It is a moat built not of innovation, but of manufacturing resource-hungry inefficiency. They deliberately ignored a more sustainable, more democratic path of tiny AI because that path wouldn't lead to a monopoly. It's a choice, not a necessity. And that brings us to the most critical point of all. None of this is inevitable. It isn't magic. It's just people.
I went to school with a lot of the people that now build these technologies. I went to school with some of the executives at OpenAI, And so for me, I do not find there to be magic. I don't find these figures to be towering or magical. Like, I remember when we were walking around the dorm rooms together in our pajamas, and it instilled in me this understanding that technology is always a product of human choices, and different humans will have different blind spots. And if you give a small group of those people too much power to develop technologies that will affect billions of people's lives, inevitably that is structurally unsound. We should not be allowing small groups of individuals to concentrate such profound influence on society when it is not, you cannot expect any individual to have such great visibility into everything that's happening in the world and perfectly understand how to craft a one-size-fits-all technology that ends up being profoundly beneficial for everyone. Like that, it just doesn't make sense at all.
This is what we have to remember. The people building these systems are not gods. Karen Howe went to school with them. She saw them in their pajamas. They are a small group of people with their own biases and blind spots who have been given an unsound amount of power to reshape the world. Technology is always a product of human choices. That is both the most terrifying and the most hopeful realization, because if their choices created this reality, then our choices can create a different one. These companies are not inevitable forces of nature. They are empires built on a specific ideology, fueled by real-world resources, and run by flawed human beings. The question now is not what the AI will do to us, but what we will do about the empires that control it. What is one choice you can make today to reclaim a piece of this future? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of what's really happening in AI, subscribe to the channel.